We're excited to have really two panels over the next morning before lunch, and then an interactive session after lunch where we want to hear from all of you and really have an opportunity to engage the audience on a number of privacy and security issues. Our first panel, just in a high level, first of all, before the panel joins us, is really talking about what is happening around the state regarding cybersecurity from military side, from Military and Veterans Affairs, the National Guard, what's happening with the Michigan Cyber Range, and then also the FBI and criminal justice organizations. And the second panel is really focused on business and what's happening in the northern part of the state and in the Upper Peninsula around cybersecurity and the local businesses, what's happening in your community, and what you can do in your businesses to protect yourself. So with that, I'd like to ask the first panel to join me up on the stage, and I'd like to introduce the moderator for the first panel, who is Rakowski. Rock is a cybersecurity manager for the state of Michigan, and he will serve as the moderator for the first panel. So join me in welcoming the first panel.
Good morning. I'm Rakowski. I work for the state of Michigan, Department of Technology Management and Budget, Office of Cybersecurity with Dan. We protect and monitor the state's network. This includes, as the video said, all your data everywhere. Now we're going to, this panel is going to look at it from starting at the global, bring it into the state of Michigan, and then training that exists here in the state of Michigan that can help you be ready for what we feel is inevitable things coming down the road. Now, you may wonder, global, really? The state of Michigan experiences 500,000 attacks per day, and that is per day. And we see these attacks coming from global. We see them from China, from Russia. So it is truly a global situation, and we experience it every day. All right, so with that, we'll start with the first aspect. We'll start it out with a global perspective. Special Agent David Martin with the FBI Detroit Cyber Task Force, specializing in computer intrusion, investigations, forensics, and malware analysis. He has over 10 years of law enforcement experience with the FBI, the Littleton County Police Department, and Colorado Bureau of Investigation. He has a degree in computer science from the University of Denver and is a GIAC certified intrusion analyst, a GIAC certified forensic examiner, and a GIAC certified forensic analysis. David Martin.
All right, thank you. Like I said, I'm from the FBI's Detroit Cyber Task Force, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing on a nationwide and a global scale, and in addition, what we're seeing here in the state of Michigan. And really the reality of things is that what we're seeing on a global scale, we're seeing the exact same thing here in Michigan. Any of these issues that we talk about, we're seeing equally in every field office in the FBI. So basically what the FBI's mission is, one of our top missions is to protect the United States from cyber attack, both on the criminal end of things and also on the national security, state-sponsored counterterrorism end of things. We have a unique position of being a member of the intelligence community and a law enforcement agency, so we kind of straddle that line, and we can leverage assets from both sides of the equation there as far as being able to do mutual legal assistance treaties with other countries, being able to interface with local law enforcement, and also have access to the intelligence assets of the U.S. intelligence community. Cyber threats are obviously one of the biggest threats today, and it's becoming more and more of a known fact to our administration. Our new director has identified that cyber is perhaps the biggest growing and will soon be the biggest threat that the FBI is going to face, and is beginning to move resources in that direction to be able to address that threat effectively. A lot of cyber just comes down to a risk equation. Particularly if you're a business, there is always going to be a risk out there, and it basically just comes down to understanding what your exposure is to that risk, what kind of risk you can tolerate, and what the upsides are that you have to basically weigh the risk against the vulnerability and weigh that against the reward in deciding what your posture is going to be and what actions you might want to take. Some of the cyber threats that we run into, obviously cyber terrorism is a big concern of the FBI. So far, most of what we've seen is more in the social media realm, things like website defacements, extremist forums, communications over the internet. But there's definitely an interest out there in developing destructive cyber attacks and being able to do something beyond sort of the internet graffiti of just defacing someone's website and saying death to America. Another thing we see a lot, gets a lot of news coverage, is the hacktivists, anonymous and they're like. They're more of what you think of as the traditional kind of hackers who just kind of want to create chaos, oftentimes have a social cause that they want to create disruption with some organization or a business that they don't like. They're the financially motivated intrusions. A lot of these are, particularly Eastern European organized crime is really big into these. We have these ACH fraud attacks. You have a lot of credit card information that's being stolen. Basically, these guys are out there for financial gain. The other big one, and this is what I personally specialize in, is the counterintelligence intrusions. And these are actual state-sponsored military and intelligence organizations that work for the country or for the government of another country, and they're out to steal intellectual property, research, government information, military information, commercial research, pretty much anything that would benefit their country. They're going to get into our networks and steal it. Some of the kinds of hackers that we run into, obviously we have the nation-state sponsored people. These guys are government bureaucrats. They go to work every day, 5 days a week, whatever their schedule is. They're given an objective to get into your organization, and they're going to keep pursuing that until they get in. You have other ones that are sort of contractors, whether willing or unwilling. In certain countries, if you get busted for hacking, they come to your door. They give you the option of going to jail or working for the government to do the same thing, but for the government. And then, of course, you have the insider threat. We actually just made an arrest yesterday on a case where there was an insider, an IT administrator at a hospital who was fired and on his way out took down the computer system that ran the entire hospital, took the hospital operations offline for 8 hours. And then, again, what are they after? Just about anything. One of the common perceptions is that an intelligence service is mostly going to be after military information, government computers. What you got to remember about a lot of the countries that are doing these attacks is there is no separation between the government and private industry. Government owns private industry in a lot of countries like China. So to use an analogy, if in Michigan, let's say GM got stuck on a design idea and we use the same system in America that they do in China, GM would call up the NSA, who would then go hack Ferrari over in Italy, figure out what they're doing, and then hand it over to GM. We see the same sort of situation where companies in a lot of these countries can go directly to their country's intelligence service and leverage those assets to basically do their R&D for them in our networks. Vulnerabilities are everywhere. There are obviously a lot of vulnerabilities out there, a lot of spaces that you can be attacked in, but really one of the biggest ones that it comes down to in I'd say about 80% of intrusions is a spear phishing email. I mean, we'll see those other 20% are application vulnerabilities or features sometimes. You'll see a lot of other avenues of attack, but most of the time it just comes down to exploiting the human. And then what's the consequence? Obviously, once someone gets into your network, they can walk off with a lot of information. I mean, we've had companies go into negotiations with other countries, and they come to the table, and the negotiators on the other side of the table already know their bottom line. We've had other companies that have technology get out there. They don't even realize it until someone comes to them from another country a couple years down the line asking for support with a system that's suspiciously looks exactly like the system that they had developed and is now being marketed as another country's own intellectual property. And like I said, all it takes is one click on an email. And this is the most common intrusion vector, and they get very convincing about these. I mean, I've seen some of these spear phishing emails that probably would have gotten me. First they'll start out trying to send something with just a spoofed email address. If that gets caught by your email filters, they'll take it a step further. They'll create a very similar looking email address that, in the hopes that you just don't look at the domain name that it's coming from. If that doesn't work, maybe they'll actually compromise an email account of one of your suppliers, one of the people you work with all the time, and send something from their legitimate email account. It has a PDF document in there. You click on it, it opens exactly what it looks like it should be, but it also quietly installs a backdoor on your system. There's a lot of information out there on the internet, and it's not just limited to the very technologically savvy people anymore. There are these sort of pre-built things like Metasploit, Backtrack Linux, Kali, the new version of Backtrack, where people can basically just kind of have a do-it-yourself, quick and easy hacking wizard, essentially. Another database that's out there is the Shodan, which has just this catalog of different systems out on the internet that you can work to compromise. Just a quick word about the two avenues for FBI and how we run investigations. We have the criminal side of the house and we have the national security side of the house. And basically the difference is if it's a hacktivist group, if it's somebody trying to steal money, it's generally the criminal side of things. And in that case, we have basically our goal is to prosecute the people, and whether it be in their home country or here in the United States, and get them extradited. In those cases, we do have certain rules of evidence we have to follow. We have things that are discoverable by the defense, and certain information will eventually come out if it goes to trial. The national security side of the house is basically dealing with counterterrorism and counterintelligence intrusions. And the goal is obviously not to prosecute. We'd love to be able to prosecute these people, but it's not like we can exactly call up this other country and say, hey, would you please surrender this intelligence officer that works in your country, or this military officer, because they're just not going to do it. So what our goal in these kind of investigations instead is to basically get one step ahead of the attackers and warn their end victims. Basically try and keep a step ahead of them and keep companies and organizations here in the U.S. from losing their data. This information is not going to be shared. Pretty much all of this is run at the secret or better level, and the information is just never going to be publicly released because it never has to for prosecution. What we can do, basically we have the ability to investigate a lot of different things. One of our big advantages is having access to our legal attaché offices all over the world. That way if you have an attack that's coming from somewhere in Eastern Europe, we probably have a legal attaché in that country that can work with the local law enforcement over there and maybe actually reach out and get these people. Sometimes our results obviously vary depending on what country they're in and how cooperative they are. We also have offices, obviously we have a cyber task force in every one of our field offices, so when you have these cyber attacks that have pieces all over the country, we can use that to be able to basically wrap up the entire scheme in one investigation and be able to follow it to the end. We have the ability here locally out of the Detroit office to be able to do forensics, intrusion response, and be able to basically analyze an intrusion end to end without having to send stuff off to another office, which speed things up quite a bit. And then we also work with, we can get information from a lot of other national security components, other intelligence agencies, to be able to correlate these attacks throughout the country and the world. We've recently started shifting our posture in the FBI, what we call next-gen cyber, basically just trying to realign our cyber division for the reality of how the global cyber threat works, where we have a cyber task force in every field office so that each intrusion set is worked out of one office, but the different pieces of the investigation are handled by the local office where a victim or a piece of intruder infrastructure may be located. We also have started our cyber task force where we're actually pulling in, trying to bring local agencies on board. We have Michigan State University Police and Michigan State Police have officers either embedded with us or in the process of becoming embedded with our cyber squad down in Detroit. And we're looking for other agencies to be able to bring other officers in, be able to work a lot of these intrusions, starting on the local level and being able to hand off to national assets when the case is appropriate, and be able to kind of foster that partnership and share resources. We've got a lot of other things out there as far as the being able to share things with other parts of the intelligence community, just so that we don't spend a lot of time reinventing other people's wheels. As far as our response, what we're not looking to do, we don't want to take over your system. We are not going to tell you how to mitigate the threat necessarily. We're going to give you the information that you need to mitigate the threat, but we're not going to go out there and tell you, all right, here's how you have to run your network. We're not going to tell the media, your competitors, anyone else, hey, look what company just got hacked. Basically our goal is to try and provide you the information that you need to defend your own network and to investigate the people who committed the intrusion. A couple things that have come up in the media recently, some examples of capabilities that some of these attackers have. We got the Al-Qassam cyber fighters that were launching a lot of DDoS attacks on banks. This is one of those things where we're starting to see some of the terrorist groups looking at trying to use cyber as an actual weapon to go after people. Something the nation state arenas figured out a long time ago, that it's a lot safer to sit behind your computer and do damage than have to actually go to a foreign country and risk arrest to do that same kind of damage. We have the Red October cyber attack where, kind of ironically, Kaspersky Lab discovered this 5-year-old intrusion set that was going after all sorts of different networks, targeting energy networks, some pretty scary stuff out there. We had the Mandiant report last year on one of these large Chinese intrusion sets. We actually worked through the FBI with Mandiant to help make sure that we had the accurate intelligence in this report, and it was, if you've ever read the report, it's pretty amazing how much this one intrusion set had compromised here in the U.S. And then another case that we've had is the Dark Soul attacks in South Korea last year, where a group that South Korea and Symantec have both identified as being from North Korea went in and basically unleashed a computer virus that destroyed between 40 and 50,000 computer systems in South Korea. Took out their ATM system, took out several of their major media outlets, and wiped the computers back to the point where every single computer affected had to be re-imaged from the start. And just a quick concluding thing, one of the things that we're always looking for is to try and forge partnerships with both the private industry and with other law enforcement agencies, educational institutions. Obviously, we have a limited number of people. We're not going to see everything, and the more people that we have that we can work with, that's the biggest advantage that we have against trying to combat this threat. Obviously, we can't see everything that's going on out there, and if we can be a force multiplier, if we can pass the information out to a lot of private companies to begin defending their own networks, to work with local law enforcement and work with the educational sector to be able to start identifying these threats and finding better ways to deal with them. And as our former director said, there are two kinds of company: those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. And that's really the reality of things. It's not so much about preventing the attack anymore. It's being able to understand that you have been attacked and then take steps to quickly remediate that threat and get the intruders off your system before you really lose something important. All right, here is my contact information, and I'll obviously be available for questions here shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're going to hold questions till the end so that we make sure we have time for each presenter. So that was an excellent global perspective of just what is going on out there. To bring it a little closer to home here, we have Brigadier General Michael Stone. He is the Assistant Adjutant General for Installations for the Michigan Army National Guard. He serves as Michigan's dual status commander for domestic response situations. He's responsible for Army armories and installations, strategic communications, strategic level cyber, and National Guard employment initiatives. General Stone.
Thanks, Ron. Morning. So, probably should give you a little bit of background, because a lot of people, when you say National Guard, they have their own impressions of that. But in Michigan, we have 11,000 Army and Air Guardsmen. Most of them are part-time. Being in the UP, Marquette is one of our favorite places. This is a very unique ecosystem here. The only place where we have an armory actually on a college campus is right here at Northern Michigan University. Last March, Governor Snyder signed an executive order creating the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency based upon the realism and recognition that we've got a very large veterans population. The Upper Peninsula has a very large veterans population per capita. and there weren't enough resources there. So the Jacob Eddy Home for Veterans here in Marquette is one of 2 homes in Michigan, reports up to the Veterans Affairs Agency, which in turn reports up to my boss, Major General Greg Vadnais, the Adjutant General of Michigan. So General Vadnais also wears multiple hats besides commanding the Army and Air National Guard. Governor Snyder is created working groups at the executive level. He is the public safety group leader, so he works closely with Colonel Christy Etchu, the Michigan State Police, and corrections. So when we talk and I get into the National Guard and what we're doing, I wanted to kind of give you a perspective. We're one of our mottos is always ready, always there, and most people, when they think of the National Guard, they think of the flood response here in the UP, the fire response, and that's part of what we do. But of course, we've got the away game too, and part of that away game represents, since 9/11, over 23,000 Michigan National Guard deployments, 21 soldiers paying the ultimate sacrifice and giving their lives on America and the battlefields across the ocean. And I can tell you a lot of what affected me about cyber a few years ago. I learned a lot working with interagency partners like the FBI in Iraq. I was really kind of woken up by the electronic warfare capabilities that were out there, what the threat was, even with Al-Qaeda, who's pretty remedial comparatively to some of these state actors that David Martin talked about here a minute ago. So the Department of Defense now has added cyber as one of its domains of war. I mean, most people have heard land, sea, air, or Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. But, space was added a number of years ago, and really the Air Force leans heavily into that. But cyber as a domain of warfare is a fairly new concept in the Department of Defense. And you've got NSA, and you have U.S. Cyber Command. They're basically one and the same. Now we have created our Army Cyber Command. So for the U.S. Army, let me get into that slide next. For the Army, cyber is new. I mean, we've always had an electronic warfare threat. We've had signal officers. We have some experts like Dr. Adams, and I won't step on him and his presentation, his experiences, but he's by far and away much more educated and has much more cyber experience than I'll ever have. But what's interesting is the Air National Guard, the Air Force has been leaning into cyber for a while. The Air National Guard started taking its signal units and creating and sending our Air Guardsmen to school to understand the cyber threat and be able to counter it and defend. In Michigan, the 110th Air Wing in Battle Creek has a cyber detachment that was really created out of Hyde. And the Army really, there is zero Army force structure in the Army National Guard for cyber today. That is changing rapidly. So a lot of people, what's the old saying, you don't know what you don't know? The Army's learning quickly and getting up to speed on what this is. And when you do the analysis, we met with Senator Levin probably 2 years ago, gave him a cyber brief down in Battle Creek with the cyber detachment. He got this right away. He's the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. When you try to build force structure for cyber, imagine you're active duty and you hear the recruiting ads and some 18-year-old runs off to a recruiting station, goes on active duty, and they send that young soldier or airman to school for 1 or 2 years, and then they go on duty for 1 or 2 years. In the cyber domain, I can't even begin to predict how large those bonuses are going to have to be to retain that active duty soldier or airman. Those bonuses are climbing rapidly because the skill sets that those cyber warriors are attaining are going to be in great demand and are in great demand by corporate America. So when you think about it, the National Guard is very logical that, I learned a long time ago commanding a rocket battalion that I had 13 papas who did fire direction. So they got to go do their civilian jobs during the week, and on weekends they got to launch rockets 40 miles. They were all computer programmers. They all made about $100,000 or more a year in their civilian jobs, but they wanted to wear the uniform, and they thought it was cool. And they were E4s and 5s, very low-paying, maybe E6s, sergeants, entry-level sergeants, that just loved serving their country, doing something cool on the weekend, but having those computer skills. I see that as the future here, that the reserve components, the guards especially, because of the different authorities the Guard has working for the governor and staying in a state status and not having to have a federal activation in a major cyber event, being very valuable. And most experts now that are studying this, even the Army cyber commander who spoke down in Huntsville a few weeks ago about this, said that the end state is that most of our force structure is probably logically going to have to be in the Guard and Reserve because of that dual status, that we probably won't be able to afford to pay for that large force structure for events. Oops, let me go back one. So my apologies, this font's a little bit small on this, but my boss asked our team, Army and Air, to put together some of our cyber capabilities, and we have, at General Vadnais' direction, created a lot of cyber capability out of Hyde. But really what's most important to us is, what's most important to us is that as base realignment and closures come, as you see defense cuts coming, General Vadnais on the front line working with the governor's office and the legislative delegation in D.C., and there's going to be changes in force structure. So we know we're going to swap out units. General Vadnais is leaning into higher tech cyber and space assets for the Michigan National Guard. So some of our classic formations we may be ordered to come down in size and scope of the number of units and the number of authorized positions, but if we're going to trade force structure, we're going to trade to something relevant, and cyber is going to lead the way. We have already been told by the National Guard Bureau we're going to pick up a signal battalion. We're right now the work's being done to see what types of units will convert, and we'll lose bodies or packs in each of these business deals, but we want to have that cyber signal capability, computer defense network capability in Michigan. We are working hard to grow our cyber detachment in the Air National Guard to a cyber squadron, which has got much more capability. But part of it is public-private. You know, on the far right side there, one of the most important relationships we have is with Dr. Adams and Merritt. So I had the pleasure of working with a number of people on the governor's cyber initiative, his first year in office, and a number of the folks here today worked on that as well. I really didn't even know what a cyber range was. I remember Joe's boss walking in one day, Dr. Welch, I just met him, and he asked me, well, what do you know about cyber ranges, General? And I, I've heard of them. I really hadn't paid attention to them. And lo and behold, I went home that night and came back the next day and said, wow, I want one of those. And my boss said yes. So what have we done? So Merit, and I hope I'm not stealing part of your presentation, Joe, but the Merit Network, a nonprofit, a 501c3, has over 4,000 miles of closed fiber across Michigan and across, ironically, every state in FEMA Region 5 it touches. And some of my predecessors had looked at that capability and looked at cyber and defending critical infrastructure and what could possibly be done. And this concept came up not from the National Guard, but from the working group and from Merit to stand up cyber ranges. Eastern Michigan University has the first hub that opened in Michigan to open the Michigan Cyber Range, Ferris State, and now Northern. So now you've got 3 universities. Well, we thought it would be pretty neat idea and very logical that if we had cyber range hubs, unclassified cyber range hubs on National Guard installations. As soon as I got with Joe's team, I realized that fiber runs very close or nearby most of our installations. So our end state is to have an unclassified cyber range hub at each installation. And the original thought process was this. I used to be responsible in Michigan National Guard for Homeland Security, Director Joint Staff, had a full staff on every weekend, about 100 people, that would look at all the 15 national planning scenarios, and one of those 15 is cyber attack. So how do you prepare for a response to a deliberate cyber attack? Not just a bank being hacked, not just a small event, but a large-scale event. Maybe your power grid is knocked out for an extended period of time in a deliberate attack, or your water system. So I really spent a lot of time focusing on critical infrastructure. And what I realized my first trip to NSA in an exercise, it was at the top secret level. There were no civilian partners. And 80% of your critical infrastructure in America is privately owned, and 85% of it is operated by civilians. So how do you prepare for a deliberate cyber attack and response if the civilians can't play? So we've worked on a business model here, and we've now opened the 110th Air Wing has an unclassified cyber range hub. Fort Custer, 2.2 miles away, will be capable and up and running probably within 2 weeks. Camp Grayling will be up and running before the end of the summer. We're working on the resourcing for Combat Readiness Training Center Alpena, and we're having advanced discussions with Macomb County and Selfridge at this time. So that would give us capability installations. The other thought process is partnering with community colleges and universities, especially ones with information assurance programs. That's important to us because those are the same building blocks that NSA uses for the talent. So what we want to do is set conditions for future workforce, future guardsmen, future cyber warriors to get the same training to defend networks that's required by the military, and it's also required by corporations, and leverage that most important resource, which is people. So having the relationships with the community colleges, the universities, the IA programs is very important to us. We're in discussions with Alpena Community College about a memorandum of agreement. Maybe they have a cyber range hub and we don't have to pay for one that we don't have the funding for. And I wish President Haynes were still here because we've had some informal discussions, and when we met in D.C. a couple of years ago and had some early discussions about this and leveraging the relationship between the Guard and Northern Michigan's capability share with cyber. So in the state of Michigan, part of that original cyber initiative that was published on the state website, www.michigan.gov/cybersecurity, one word, originally was posted, right now today what you see if you go to that website is the Michigan Cyber Disruption Response Strategy. The governor alluded that to in his video. This was a collaborative effort between DTMB, Michigan State Police, the National Guard, and other partners in state government of what are the processes for responding and the levels of response. We did get inputs from the FBI. We work with them frequently for those inputs, but that's now seen as a national model. General Vadney was at U.S. Northern Command about 6 weeks ago, and actually another general briefed Michigan's response plan to all these other generals at the event. And General Vadney said, hey, that's my plan. Look at there. I'm right there on the front page, guys. So, but we've worked, in the Michigan State Police has done a great job working with DTMB and the Michigan Cyber Command Center, and working with the SEOC, the State Emergency Operations Center. So ground is going to be broken soon on a new State Emergency Operations Center in Lansing for all agencies to come together in a state emergency. What we're going to do is we're going to co-locate a SCIF, or a secret compartmentalized information facility, Department of Defense, National Guard operated facility next to it. They're not going to be connected or combined, but Kansas has a fusion center concept where they have the high-end, top-secret capability within walking distance of their State Emergency Operations Center. They have their critical infrastructure partners with top-secret clearance that can get into both facilities, utility companies. The FBI is part of that. We're in discussions with the FBI of how to structure that. But this is forward-leading stuff so you can see the threat at different levels of classifications and give people what they need to know. But I threw in here also a slide about how the Cyber Command Center would work in relationship to the SEOC. Maybe we can get into some of the Q&A because I know I'm taking up a lot of time. But really, if there is a cyber threat, state police see something, say something, want it fed up to the local level, to the state level, so you get the common operating picture, coordinate with the FBI at the federal level, so there's a common operating picture. Maybe there's a deliberate hack on one company in one part of the state, a deliberate hack in another part of the state. We need a place where that can be fused, that information, so you can see a pattern developing, and that will be fed into and work closely with the Michigan Intelligence Operations Center to re-disseminate that back out and give warnings to the local communities and to the affected corporations, and work partnership between state and Fed. So with that, I will get off the stage and save it for Q&A.
Thank you, General Stone. That brought it a little closer to home here. Some definite Michigan connections, Michigan initiatives going on. And a little tease there for the cyber range. So now you want some more information on cyber range. So we have Dr. Joe Adams, Vice President of Research and Cybersecurity for Merit Network. Dr. Adams was previously the CIO for National Defense University. He's also served as a professor and research scientist at West Point and network engineer for the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers of Europe. He has a Ph.D. in computer engineering from Virginia Tech, master's degree from the Army War College and University of Arkansas, as well as a bachelor's in computer engineering from Syracuse. Dr. Adams.
So what you've heard so far is the very high level. It's the national scope, it's the state scope, and now I'm going to bring it more to the personal level. As General Stone mentioned, I work for Merit Network. We are Michigan's research and education network. We're also the oldest research and education network in the country. And we started back in 1966 as one of the original NSFNet grant recipients. So no matter what Al Gore says, we invented the internet. So the topic title today was, are we prepared for cyber defense? And my two previous speakers have talked about what they're doing to try and mitigate. And that's the key word here. You can never defeat a cyber attack. Right? The first thing you got to realize is the attack scope is just too broad. How many people had to renew credit cards thanks to Target? Okay? How many of you have ever gone online to get your Social Security statement from the Social Security Administration? Let me tell you, when I did that, I got an eye-opening experience. To get my account verified, it has to ask you 3 questions. The first question it asked me was, of course, where did I go to high school? Then it asked me which one of the following 4 was my license plate number. And then it said, pick the city where you were married. Now, if that doesn't scare you that the Social Security Agency can put all that information together, and oh, by the way, I was married in Denmark. So they have all that. They pulled it together, and sure enough, I verified my questions and I have my account. Big data is probably your biggest enemy. I don't have to hack you. I just have to figure out enough about you, and then I can go every place else on this map and start getting your information, getting your access. Why does that matter? Here is the battlefield. In January, a major security agent or major security company found a spam botnet. One of the spam bots was in a refrigerator. It was an embedded Linux system that had been found using Shodan, which is the SCADA search engine, and somebody had actually planted a nice little SMTP server and was using it just to send out spam mail. Now, I tell that story and people kind of giggle, you know, okay, yeah, my beer's going to be a little warm, maybe my butter will melt. But what they don't understand is the same vulnerability that got them into this household refrigerator applies to hospital blood banks, applies to hospital pharmacies. If I can, all I got to do is raise the temperature 4 degrees and I have spoiled the blood supply. As a terrorist, that's huge because I don't have to kill people, I just have to scare them. I have to show them that their government can't protect them. So all this, the embedded systems are going to be the next battlefield because those little Linux boards are cheap. Why does somebody need a megabyte of RAM in a refrigerator? The answer is they don't. But when I'm buying 500,000 units as a refrigerator manufacturer, it's just cheaper to do one size fits all. And the fact that now I have in place the capability for a small SMTP server in a refrigerator, in a washing machine, clothes dryer, needs to be recognized. And we need to be prepared for that. Because if your refrigerator wasn't bad enough, just look at the medical community. There's a professor at the University of Michigan named Kevin Fu, fellow Virginia Tech grad, makes a living out of pointing out medical device vulnerabilities. Dan mentioned at the very beginning of the panel presentation that, yep, yesterday Windows XP was out of the inventory. But that's Windows XP Service Pack 3. Look at how many X-ray machines, cancer radiation machines are still running Windows XP Service Pack 2. Why? Because the vendors made it for Service Pack 2, and they haven't gone back to upgrade it. What's worse, there's no development platform for them to be able to test patches to see if it works if they upgrade it. And Kevin has actually documented instances of cancer patients dying from overexposure because some machine was out of tolerance. He wrote about another cancer patient who actually overdosed because his drug pump gave him 20 times the amount of drug that he was supposed to get. Do you remember when former Vice President Cheney told him to turn off the Bluetooth in his pacemaker? Well, that wasn't paranoia. That was real. We can get into Bluetooth on your phone, on your pacemaker. Bluetooth itself is a very, very unsecure protocol. And while it's great for the pacemaker people and great for the patients because we no longer have to do intrusive surgery to check their device, it actually leaves them open. You can detect them. If you can detect them, you can modify it. Just ask somebody who's had a heart attack what happens when they feel their heart skip a beat. They get concerned really fast. And that's what we can do just on this Internet of Things battlefield. So let's go back and talk about what we're doing to try and protect that. The general mentioned that 85% of critical infrastructure is controlled by civilians. That means all my friends at CyberCorps, the NSA, they're in react mode. They can't do anything until they're called. So that means the first line supervisors are the people, the civilians running the networks, or the civilians with their home computers. Now I'm going to take a wild guess. Now I'm going to say everybody here has a computer. I'll take an even wider guess and say that most students on American campuses have between 5 and 7 computing devices on them at any one time. Just go and ask your campus IT folks. So each one of these, in fact, I like to point out to my daughters, this smartphone has more computing power than we had to send people to the moon. So if you can get this and leverage that computing power, you can make a difference. So what the cyber range is focused on doing is training those people. So I will tell you the first thing you need to do if you're interested in the cybersecurity field, go to school and learn how to program. Right? I don't care what you're programming in. I used to teach Pascal. That's how old I am. But you can learn C, you can learn Python, you can learn Perl. Get yourself a good foundational understanding of computer science, computer engineering, or electrical engineering. Learn how a network works. Then, once you get into the industry, you're going to find out that it's certification driven. That's where the range comes in. We offer 17 different certifications in everything from leadership to penetration testing, which is used by auditors, by the way, to forensic analysis for the law enforcement, to leadership. All those things. And we encourage folks to kind of take a little from one and take a little from the other. We especially encourage technicians, people who have been through our pen testing or forensics classes, to go back and take things in incident handling, disaster recovery, and leadership. Because as you go up the chain, becoming a first line, then a second line supervisor, your scope broadens. And you need to be able to bring those pieces together to be effective and to mitigate the vulnerabilities that are out there. So the secret is whenever you talk to an Army guy about training, we're going to talk 3 phases. What I just described was the crawl phase. Certifications and foundational education give you the skills to contribute to a team. And believe me, computer security is a team sport. So once we've got you crawling, we want you to walk. And that's where the range hosts various capture the flag exercises, where you work as a small group to find, mitigate, and secure against a wide range. Right now we have 7 different threads that run through our CTF, but a wide range of vulnerabilities and challenges. This means that you have to bring your individual skills in with somebody who has maybe different skills. Just for example, you're defending a website. So you're going to have somebody who's probably an operating system and hardware specialist, somebody who's doing the web server, and somebody else who's doing the database that's sitting at the back end. And those 3 people have to talk to each other. We want you to learn how to do that, learn how to maneuver, and then we want you at the run stage. And this is where it's real fun, because at the run stage, the web server team has to talk to the firewall team, has to talk to the intrusion detection guys, has to talk to the mail server. And it all has to work together. And at that point, communication is tantamount. It's all about telling people what you see, telling people how you've reacted, telling people what you plan to do. I like, in the Army, in fact, going on right now, the NSA is running their annual Inter-Service Academy Cyber Defense exercise. So this is where the 5 federal service academies, the Naval Postgraduate School, Air Force Institute of Technology, and the Royal Military College of Canada get together and have a live, week-long cybersecurity exercise. Now, it was my privileged to be able to win that competition all 3 years I was at West Point the last time. And I can assure you, it's about communication. Because the fun stuff happens Thursday morning at about 2 o'clock when you've been up for a month, you've been up all week getting shot at by the NSA's red team, and you hate your friends, you've been eating lousy food, and you're sleeping on a cot. So, but that's when we test our cyber warriors. Somebody wants to call themselves a cyber warrior? Okay, let's go. But it's going to be a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week mission, and you've got to be on your game all that time. So we bring all those through the range. We work extensively with the National Guard, with DTMB and the various branches of state government. As the general mentioned, we are, one of our 3 sites is here at Northern. As Merritt is very well connected with Michigan's higher ed, and in fact, higher ed across the country. We really want to promote learning and education from K through 12 all the way into professional education and beyond. So with that, I'll kind of leave it for question and answer. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Okay, here's your opportunity. There has to be some questions. We covered a lot of ground. Yes, sir. Wait for the microphone.
I'm a professor. I don't normally need the microphone. But a quick question for you. One of the things that I have experienced from my cyber background is that the threat is growing exponentially, and it seems like our resources to confront that are growing linearly, and it seems like we're losing the resource battle. Any comments about that? How are we doing, particularly at the federal level? I'm wondering how we really understand the problem.
All right.
I think at the federal level, they're beginning to understand the problem, at least on the higher administration end of things. I think we're a ways behind, honestly. And basically our idea of those of us who do understand the threat is that the only way we're going to be able to respond to it is to try and meet it in an exponential fashion by trying to bring in private basically bring private companies into the fold. That we can't detect intrusions, we can't mitigate intrusions at hundreds of thousands of companies, but if we can get the word out to those hundred thousands of companies, we can use that as a force multiplier, because we're never going to be able to grow our own resources exponentially.
I think from my perspective, I had a lot of formal training in the incident command system. And as Joe and I will talk about, as Army guys, the old Sun Tzu saying, he who defends everywhere defends nowhere. And you cannot defend against all of this. And in the incident command system, what's unique about it is all events happen, start local and end local, whether it's Katrina, a forest fire, or anything else. And in the incident command system, the locals respond first and then ask for help, and it's the county level, then to the state level, the emergency operations center, then to the federal level. So if you have a process and a system, and the incident command system is a national system under presidential directive, you at the local level can have a problem and reach up and follow those protocols and systems, and those resources will come at different levels to the assistance until the problem is mitigated. I don't care if it's a fire, a forest fire, a dirty bomb, a hurricane, a flood, a tornado. I think it's process driven, and really is you know, I know, and most people in this room know, it's really about people. And the people, it's awareness. That's part of what this series is about and why we're here today, is create that awareness and standardization. If we all learn by the same business rules, follow the NIST standards and the training, and the governor is very vocal about this wherever he goes, is how do we create that workforce in Michigan and send more people into this ever-growing field. And one, it's good for jobs in the economy, but it's two, for security, for stability in our communities.
Yeah, I would echo that, because, I mean, what you need to realize is, anecdotally, we've seen, again, from anything from forest fires to house fires to cyber events, the actions taken by a first responder ripple throughout the rest of that response. And so if we can train that first responder, whether that's the home computer user, that's the intern in the ER, the network administrator, then we can shape the battle. A great example is the Saudi Aramco hack that was done a couple months ago now. 35,000 machines at this huge oil and gas company in Saudi Arabia taken down by the Iranians. Well, I can tell you that it wasn't a government guy that discovered it. It was some poor schlub coming to work with a cup of coffee in his hand, just expecting to have another day at the office, and he finds out that he's been owned. And 35,000 machines are now sitting there down, and all those users are calling him. And it's going to be his training, his knowledge of what's going on, and his willingness to call for help and how to direct that help that's going to be the deciding factor. So I think that you're not going to get exponential resources. So all you can do is arm the populace with the knowledge they need to help themselves.
All right, thanks for the question. I think you realize each speaker here realizes the issue, and they're trying to deal with it. Another question?
Dr. Adams, can you tell us a little bit about the Cyber Civilian Corps and when that's going to start?
You're going to get me in trouble.
First off, what is the cyber?
So what is the Cyber Civilian Corps? Okay, so the Cyber Civilian Corps is an initiative of Governor Snyder's that he kicked off last October at the Governor's Summit. The idea is, just as I described, kind of hearkening back to colonial militias, to the Minutemen, when somebody could say, we have a problem, and people would come out to the village green with their muskets and be ready to defend the town in conjunction with other organizations or other Minutemen in the area. So the idea is that coming soon in May, we will make a formal announcement of the formation and creation of the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps, so MyC3. And in MyC3 will be cells of 5 people each, trained and staffed to do incident response and forensic analysis. So mom and pop soda shop gets knocked over. These are the people during a state of declared emergency who the state could use to go in and help that commercial enterprise pick themselves back up off the ground, analyze what's going on, help law enforcement while getting this small business back into operation. Throughout most of its time, however, we see this as a good place for organizations, people, professionals to learn skills, to network together, to work together, to form a community of practice across the state. So now, just like the example I used with Saudi Aramco, now that system administrator has somebody that he knows or she knows that they could call to get help. Hey, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? Have you ever seen, Windows XP do this? Those kind of experience sharing is very valuable, especially these days as we see IT staffs getting slimmed down by budget cuts. I can tell you, all right, so Merit is, as he said, a member-owned organization. So NMU and the 11 of the other large four-year colleges are called our governing members, so they actually own Merit. But we also have 315 basic members, and this is all the four-year colleges in the state, 85% of the two-year colleges, 76% of the K through 12 school districts, most of the public libraries, local government offices, county government offices. All those folks belong to Merit. And so the idea is that we can give a head start when coupled with the industry here in the state. We've got pretty good coverage over the IT professionals in the state. Some of those small colleges have 2 people on their IT staff. So they need that kind of help. You go to a lot of these small businesses, they've got one web designer who hosts their website someplace else. That's the kind of people that need the help because security is only as good as your weakest link. So that's what the Cyber Civilian Corps is aiming to do. And I'm sure you'll hear more about it coming into the summer. There's going to be a major announcement made at the Michigan Cyber Range Conference on the 20th of May. We're holding it at the Eagle Crest Marriott in Ypsilanti. So I hope as many of you can come as possible. Thanks.
All right, so you've heard it here first, breaking news. And obviously that connects to David Martin's comment that he needs to include the private industry in order to really make an effort to move forward. So this is a connecting step here. So right now, we are going to have a networking break. We will be back here at 11:25 for the next panel session. So if you have additional questions, you want to speak privately to the sponsors or to the panelists here, we'll see you at 11:25. Thank you.